special CONNECTpreneur Masterclass powered by Expert LLC. It's called Making the Pitch, the keys to a successful presentation. I'm Tian Wong, founder and host of the Big Idea CONNECTpreneur community. We are a global community of over 30,000 investors, founders, and business leaders from around the world. We also help companies and alternative investment management companies raise money through our network of over 4,000 accredited private investors, angels, and family office investors throughout the US. Today's masterclass is scheduled for 60 minutes. We'll have time, plenty of time for Q&A. So if you have any questions for our instructors, you can feel free to type them directly into the group chat, or you can private chat with our co-host and CONNECTpreneur Assistant Community Manager, Avery North. Or you can just wait until Q&A starts and then raise your hand and ask the question yourself. Today, I'd like to thank Paul Korkematz, principal at Expert LLC, who helped arrange this wonderful masterclass. And we are very excited about this topic because, as everybody knows, presentations are everything today. And we have two awesome instructors. We have David Miller, who's a senior C-suite executive with over 30 years of experience as an attorney, business executive. He's led corporate organizations, strategic initiatives, and projects, and he established Expert LLC to help companies achieve success in both the federal and commercial markets. We also have Robin Camerote, who's the head of Robin Camerote Coaching and Consulting. Robin has over 25 years of consulting, coaching, and organizational development experience. We're thrilled to have both of you joining us today. David, why don't we start with you? Welcome, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today.
Dan, thanks, and welcome to everyone. We're glad to be here, and hopefully we will have some wisdom to share during the course of the day. We've already been introduced by Tien, but let me cover a couple of other things that we might not have touched on. Expert was created in 2014 as a place where we could bring together some of what we consider to be the industry's best resources to assist companies in a variety of ways. We provide services from strategic and business planning into business development and proposals, including orals coaching, which we'll be talking about today, and into management and operations. Our goal is to find and tailor specific solutions geared towards each of the clients that we serve. Today, we'll focus on one aspect of the services that we provide, and that is helping companies get ready for executive presentations of one form or another. Robin?
Well, thanks so much, David. I am just delighted to be here. So good morning, everybody. I'm calling in from Falls Church, Virginia. And as they've said, I'm a leadership development trainer and an executive coach. And I'm just really delighted here to talk about really how to make the pitch. So we can go ahead and dive in, David.
Let's go forward.
This awesome computer.
These are some of the topics that we will cover today. I'm not going to list them all here. You can read them on here. But what I do want to say is at the outset, what we want to try and do is address topics that are of interest to you. So in preparation for this, we talked to Tien and Avery, and they indicated that many people in the audience will be making pitches in two different categories. One of them is if you are pursuing funding of some sort, say from an angel investor, there are certain things that you will want to do in a pitch that you make to them. Or if you are pursuing a different kind of work stream for a government agency, for example. The topics that we're going to cover today will work for any kind of presentation that you are making, and we'll talk about the difference between both live and virtual presentations. But the goal here will be to cover two major topics, and that is the content that goes into your presentation and then the actual methodology for making those presentations. We'll have plenty of time for questions, and we'll provide some key takeaways by the end of the presentation. Robin?
All right, fantastic. Well, let's get rolling. So as David said, making a successful pitch is really 50-50. It's half content and half delivery. And so as we get started today, I would invite you to kind of think about a pitch you have in your mind. It might be something that you're currently working on. It might be something that you know you want to give in the future, but have something in mind, because I think as we go through this, it helps to have an example that is specific to you. So one of the most important starting points is really getting clear on your purpose and your objectives. Why are you doing this pitch to begin with? And I will share just from my personal experience that this is such a key fundamental first step. And it's one that I have skipped in the past. And really, it's been a huge mistake. There was a couple of years ago, I had applied to speak at a conference. It was really a little bit of kind of an overview of a project that I had completed, but honestly, like conference presentations are kind of a pitch to, to get invited to do additional work. So when that email came in and I got accepted and the date was set, I was so excited that my very first thing was to open PowerPoint and then start jamming away on slides, just making slides. And at some point I found myself on Wikipedia Googling something and I'm like, wait a second, I need to take a step back. Like, why am I even doing this? So as we go through this, as we get started today, I would really just encourage you to kind of think about this very basic purpose and objectives. Why are you considering doing this presentation to begin with? What do you need to say? So what is that one core message that if you got nothing else out of the presentation, if there was one core thing that you could walk away with, what would that be? And what's that ideal outcome? I think when we go into this imagining that it's going to go well, that you're going to be successful, kind of puts us in this mindset, just opens up creativity about how we might address the audience's key questions and concerns. So I'll just pause for a moment, allow you to kind of think. You can make a little note to yourself, but what are your purpose and objectives in doing this pitch to begin with? Okay, so moving on, I'm going to share this outline. So in terms of a takeaway that you might have for today, the outline I'm going to walk through are 5 slides that I feel hold up no matter what kind of pitch that you're making. So as you get started, the very first thing in terms of content that you'll want to share is the big relevant change that's happening in the world. So really putting everything in context, what is happening that makes this issue that you're going to talk about so important? So I would ask you just for a moment, let's just kind of imagine this was 5 years ago. We were, it was maybe just the kind of the beginning of electric vehicles. So imagine 5 years ago, a conversation around, electric vehicles, production is taking off and we're really, we're going to see this boom in terms of people driving electric cars. And we need to start kind of thinking ahead to what that infrastructure is going to look like to support that. So I use that as an example of something that's kind of already happened. It's relatively recent, but it's kind of already happened. But really putting any kind of putting your topic kind of in the big relevant change just gets people kind of in that right mindset. The second thing would be showing that how the failure to change would result in a positive or negative future. The message here, now, of course, you wouldn't use these exact words, but the message is you need to adapt or you get cut. So this change is happening and there's going to be some positive or negative future. So going back to that electric vehicle example, like if the infrastructure had not been started or, now it's kind of being put in place, you kind of see the charging stations everywhere. If that hadn't happened, that market wouldn't really be able to take off because there would just be no structure there to support it. Okay, so the third slide or third section in this presentation would help the audience imagine what's possible. So describe those high-level results. I would really encourage you to kind of think about that in terms of like their language and the words they would use. So what's possible when this positive change happens, when they make this change? The fourth is when you get to your specific solution. And it's intentionally this far down in the outline because before we jump in with, whatever it is that we want to sell or convince or the idea or the partnership or whatever it is, before you even get there, all of these pre-steps are so important to kind of really getting them in kind of the right mindset to be able to even hear it. So the fourth step is outlining your specific solution. And then the fifth is introducing those features, all the features, what makes your solution unique, as solving the audience very specific key pain points. So now if we back up a couple of steps, really if you kind of go back to thinking about your purpose and why you're doing this, and you're starting to do some brainstorming around like, what are my audience, what problem am I solving for my audience? This is when you have an opportunity in your presentation to introduce those features. Okay, so big relevant change in the world, how failure to change results in a positive or negative future, imagining what's possible, outlining your specific solution, and then introducing the features. That's going to really help you prepare content that both resonates with the audience and is memorable. All right, and then a brief checklist. So after you've started to put your outline and your content together, I think it's helpful to then go back and double check. Do you know who you've been pitching to and the words that they would use, not the words that we would use, but that they would use to describe their problem? Presenting the solution to their problem and what makes it unique. To the extent that you can tell a story and illustrate why now, why is it so urgent that they take action, and why this particular solution. I included this one, so keeping your pitch under 5 minutes, just having it clean, condensed, easy to read presentation, not a ton of slides. I feel like this is true even if you have an hour with somebody. If you can condense down your core message into 5 minutes of just hitting those key points in a row, it leaves all of this open space and time to really have the dialogue that you want in your pitch. So condensing down about 5 minutes, clean and easy to read slides. David's going to talk a little bit more in a minute about really how to bring those to life. And then just keeping in mind, of course, a pitch isn't your detailed project plan about all of the specific steps. So that's going to come later. Once you have the work or once you have that partnership or that funding in place, you're going to be able to really build out the detail. But it's more about demonstrating, you're thinking about how you would get it done. All right. So with that, that's your checklist for putting your content together. For now, I'm going to pass it back to David, who's going to get into the delivery portion. David?
Thanks, Robin. You now have a sense of what it is that you want to put into your content. Now the question is, how do you go about delivering that? So for the next few minutes, we're going to talk about some of the things that I've learned over the course of my years of public speaking and training people to speak that will get you to a place of greater confidence. I've often read that there are lists of things that terrify people. And one of the things that rises in the top 10, sometimes in the top 5, is public speaking. Not everybody is gifted. Not everybody wants to do it. And most of us are not really comfortable in that kind of a setting. But if you are doing some of the things that are listed on this slide, it will move you closer to being able to make the pitch with the content that Robin has just described. Well, how do you get there? On the left-hand side, it is all about practicing. The idea of going into a presentation, no matter what the significance is, without practice makes no sense. You have to practice the pitch that you are making, and you have to do it in front of an audience that can give you feedback in order to make sure that you are addressing the questions that Robin suggested. Do I have the right pain points? Have I identified the audience and how they will respond? Do I have a solution that meets their pain points? On the right-hand side are some of the things that will come only with the practice, and that is speaking naturally. I'm often asked as a coach, how do you make me a better speaker? Are you going to train me to speak in a different manner? And my answer is no. I'm going to take advantage of who you are, but speak naturally. Yes, if you are a fast speaker, I will work with you to get you to slow down. If you are a slow speaker or somebody who is not comfortable with using slides, I can train you to do that. But I'm not going to train you to be something different than who you are. And the audience needs to understand you are conveying who you are, not somebody that you have tried to emulate. How do you do that? You become more crisp and precise in the way that you convey information. We'll talk about slides very specifically in just a moment. The practice will allow you to know your content and always stay focused in the moment that you are making the presentation. The second and last point is one that I emphasize a great deal, and that's true whether you are doing your presentation or whether you're answering questions. You don't ever want to be in a position of making something up or trying to work your way through something where you don't have the answer. It is much better to tell the truth, even if that means that you are saying, I don't have the answer to that. I will go and get that answer and bring it back. Your credibility is on the line with every presentation that you make, and your credibility is dependent upon telling the truth. Now, you'll notice that both Robin and I have different ways of presenting, and I am one of the speakers who uses my hands. You want to be very careful in either a presentation or in in-person presentation or in a virtual presentation, what you do with your hands and what you do with your body. We're obviously in a virtual environment here. You can see my hands moving, but what you won't see is my hands coming up here. So you want to be very careful about what you do. How does all of this come together? Only through what happens on the left-hand side, which is practice. Slides. You see that we have slides here that guide our discussion, but there are a couple of things that I want to emphasize when you put together your slide deck for your presentation. You will see on our slide that we follow the first bullet. Less is more most of the time. Now, there are some presentations where if the presentation is going to be evaluated by people who are not listening to you, you may want to put more content on the slides. And depending on the requirements of a particular presentation, you may be required to make very dense slides. But for most presentations, less is in fact more. You want key bullet points or key graphics on your slide that will guide your audience to what you want to cover, but you want them to listen to you, not spend their time reading the slides. So you use phrases, not sentences. You use graphics and pictures wherever it's possible. I am a great believer that every slide should have something at the top and a takeaway. Now, you'll notice in saying that, I haven't done that here because we're going to give you the takeaways at the end of the presentation, and Robin has already given you takeaways in terms of a checklist. But in general terms, if you are doing a slide deck, you want to describe what the purpose is of the slide as your introduction and what you want your audience to take away at the end of it. And before you switch to the next slide, you want to ask yourself the question, what's the message I want the audience to take away? Then you can guide your audience with your words. So what's the takeaway here? Be very careful with what you put on your slides and make sure it has the message that you want that the audience will be able to follow. One of the things that I talk about a lot when I am training different groups to make presentations, either groups or individuals, is what do you do when there is discomfort? I have spent most of my life doing presentations of one form or another, but in the right context and with the right audience, I too get nervous. So what should you do about it, particularly if you are not comfortable in this kind of environment? A couple of things, left to right. The first thing is I always tell people, pay attention to the time of day and pay attention to what your intake is. So if it's early in the morning and you are somebody who normally drinks a couple of cups of coffee, whatever you do, don't drink 3 or 4 because their caffeine will get you going coupled with your adrenaline. So you want to manage what you take in, both in terms of what you drink and what you eat before a presentation. There are different relaxation techniques that allow you to think more calmly. One of the things that I tell people is if you are nervous, take a couple of deep breaths, pause in your presentation, slow yourself down, and it will allow your heartbeat to settle down. There are lots of exercises out there that you can find online about breathing techniques and relaxation techniques. But the biggest thing that I have found is if you are very comfortable with your presentation and you pause appropriately, take a deep breath, you'll find your heart rate settling back down and you'll be able to move on. I always tell people to have water nearby because there are times when your throat will get dry or that you start to get nervous. And it is never inappropriate to be able to pause in the middle of something to take a sip of water. Particularly, you can do that between slides so that it allows your last point to settle in with your audience. The last point is there are different things that people do that give them comfort. I have said that you can squeeze a coin, you can squeeze a key. There are stress balls that you can find at different stores and so on. I've even told people that if they are really nervous about it and they have a comfortable blanket or some sort of a stuffed animal that gives them comfort, put it on your lap if you're in a virtual presentation. If that's what allows you to relax, nobody's going to see what happens below the screen. The most important thing is whatever you do, focus on your audience and not on what's happening with you internally. Relax. So we've talked a little bit about what it is that you do in terms of getting ready for and getting into your presentation. How do you polish it? There are a couple of things that are different. We'll get into the difference between in-person presentations and virtual presentations, but I want to talk about three things: your face, your voice, and your body language. In a virtual presentation, there is always a camera, and you can look directly at the camera. You can look at your slides. It's much harder for your audience to see exactly where you are looking, but you want to concentrate on keeping your audience's attention. So if you are on a virtual presentation, you want to be able to look at the camera and do what you can to focus the audience's attention. If you want them to focus on the slides, then guide them. On the lower right-hand side, you will see this. Tell your audience what you want them to do, but don't forget once in a while to smile. Let them know that you are glad to be with them. What should you do with your voice? First of all, make sure your technology is working so that your computer is conveying the information in an appropriate voice and with your volume. You'll notice that when both Robin and I are talking, there are times where we pause. There are times when we move more quickly through a piece of material, and there are times where we direct your attention. That's all done via voice. So you want to make sure that you change your voice tone from time to time and change your pacing, because it allows your audience to catch up to particular points. We've talked a little bit about hand gestures. If you are doing in-person presentations, you want to be very careful about not wandering around, even in virtual presentations. I often ask the people that I'm working with not to sit in swivel chairs or rocking chairs, because there's a tendency to move, and you don't want your audience to be distracted by that. So you want to be able to sit still, hold a positive posture. And if you are not somebody who's comfortable using your hands, just keep them on your lap, out of the way where they're not a distraction. All right, so what have we talked about? Here's your checklist in terms of the presentation. It's practice, practice, practice. Know what your timing is. If you are given 15 minutes to make your presentation, make sure that your slides are adjusted accordingly. In general terms, my rule of thumb is for a substantive slide, you should spend no more than 2 minutes on it. And if you are having a 30-minute presentation, you should have somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15 slides. If they are more dense or they are simple slides, you may be able to move through them more quickly. But you always want your audience to be able to keep up with you. So be very careful about the timing and use of slides, and then practice it so you get the timing down. We call it visualization because if you are thinking about what the audience sees, whether it's on the slides or how you are delivering it, that's what will improve your performance. If you can see yourself as the audience sees you, then you will pay attention to things like your hand gestures and your voice. Practicing in front of somebody else before you get to the actual presentation is always helpful. You'll notice, as I've said, that Robin and I change our tempo. That allows you to catch up with us, and it allows you to feel like you are being brought along with each of the topic areas that we're talking about. And I want to conclude this particular slide by saying, again, be yourself. I know that you're going to be nervous, but as much as you can, convey the knowledge that you have to the audience that you are speaking to. You may not be a polished speaker, but if you are asked to speak, it is because you have content knowledge that is going to be conveyed to somebody. Be confident in that. With practice, you'll become more comfortable and confident. Let's talk a little bit more about live versus virtual presentations. Point on the left-hand side is the presentation or the preparation process is basically the same, but here are a couple of differences. When you are live, you get the opportunity to actually see and react to your audience. They can see your body language, you can see their body language. So if you are working with a slide and you see somebody who has a puzzled look on their face, you can react accordingly. If you are engaging them with eye contact, it keeps them involved in the presentation. But they are watching your body language. If they see you as nervous or they see you as uncomfortable, that's going to convey a different message than if you convey the message that you are comfortable. I've talked about limiting your movements. Normally, when I am doing presentations live, if you're at a podium, you really don't move. If you have a microphone where you're allowed to move, you don't want to move back and forth. Move at an appropriate point. One place to do that is when you are shifting from one slide to the other, but you don't want to be moving back and forth. It becomes a distraction to your audience. Also, both in virtual and live presentations, make sure you're aware of your technology. Make sure your microphones are working right, your slides are working right, and so on. Particularly in front of a live audience, you don't have the ability to recover very well. On the virtual side, pay attention to what your camera and lighting is. Most of us have become comfortable now on Zoom or the equivalent kinds of things, but what happens in your background is equally important. I'm not a fan of the shaded backgrounds because it creates a halo effect. If you are in your home office, just pay attention to what's behind you. You can see that I've got a lamp behind you. You can see that Robin's got pictures behind you. People are comfortable with the fact that you have a home office. That's okay. If you decide that you're going to be in a different environment or you're in an office space, just pay attention to the light that's behind you or above you so that your audience is not distracted by that. Most importantly, when you are doing a virtual presentation, watch out for distractions. I can't tell you how many teams I have trained where I'll see a cat go walking behind somebody, or I hear a dog barking, or I hear the doorbell ringing. There are some things that you can't control, but make sure that you've done everything that you can to avoid distractions, including this one, your cell phone. If you have not shut your cell phone off during a presentation and it goes off, it can be incredibly embarrassing. And then the last point here is always think about what could possibly go wrong when you are making the presentations. I'll give you one quick story. I was doing a training session and my internet kept going out. What I didn't understand was that my 4-year-old grandson was plugging and unplugging and plugging in the technology at the time and disconnecting my internet. Once I figured that out, we were able to go on with the presentation. Last thing is tied to what Robin talked about in terms of content. And I'm not going to go through each of these questions, but you always want to put yourself in the position of your audience. What are they thinking? If it's a team presentation, they want to know if this is a team that they can work with. Are they going to be a team of people that makes me successful? If it's a team, have they worked with each other before? Do they know each other? Do they respect each other? And are you connecting what you are conveying to what they are asking about? Robin called it the pain points. Here we call it sharing their vision. Is your material giving them the information that they are looking for? And then in the lower right-hand corner, the most important thing is, can they believe what you are conveying to them? That's where that truth comes in. One last thing I want to do before we go to sort of a summary here is talk about when you are making pitches to the federal government or to any government agency. And we are seeing that more and more agencies now are looking for oral presentations. In some respects, the oral presentation may be the entire score that you are given. In other respects, the oral presentation is done in conjunction with a written submittal. But we're seeing an increasing reliance by the government agencies on oral presentations as a substantive means of differentiating the various players who are submitting bids. There's a wide variety in terms of the requirements that are put out. In some presentations that I've coached, there are pure slide presentations where you're just doing a summary of your written proposal. That's fairly straightforward. Most agencies are combining slides with a Q&A process. Other agencies are giving technical problems in advance, and more recently, I've seen that the government is going to on-the-spot technical problems. It doesn't matter which forum you're dealing with, but you need to get someone who can guide you through that process, help you to understand the requirements, and then prepare for it. Even if you are dealing with on-the-spot technical questions, you can work with the group and practice how they deal with on-the-spot questions so that they have a methodology for conveying the information that is required. Today, the government is most likely to do presentations in a virtual format. So you have to be familiar with the technology. whether it's WebEx or Zoom or Teams, and you should always practice in that same methodology. I have a particular preference for having the team together, even if the presentation is virtual, because it allows the agency who's reviewing it to see the team interacting with each other. But that may not always happen. So I train people to do individual virtual presentations as well as being together in a team. The last and most important piece when you are making a presentation to a government agency or a funding agency is to follow their instructions and make sure that your presentation is fully compliant. That means compliant on content, compliant in time, compliant in technology. Everything that you do has to be consistent with the instructions you've been given.
Fantastic, David. And I love that story about your grandson. I'm sure in the moment it was frustrating, but it's probably funny in retrospect. So
only in retrospect.
Yeah, just to kind of bring a little closure to this part before we dive into the Q&A. Here are just some of our top 10, just takeaways in terms of really having an effective pitch. So to start, you want to keep your presentation simple. To David's point about compliance, obviously, certainly compliance comes first, and sometimes that can feel a little constraining because we have to do it in their format or something like that. But to the extent that you can keep simplicity in mind, I think that just really helps keep the focus on the message and the solution that you're proposing versus, any other a clutter or how, other things that might really distract from your intent. Prepare and practice, as David really emphasized there, just the opportunity to get in front of a live audience. I've certainly been in that position myself where I've rehearsed the slides in my head. And then when you go to do it live the first time, it just sounds so different. You just catch things in front of, a live person that you just can't do when you're reading the slides yourself. So I just, strongly encourage that one. Starting and telling strong stories or just any stories at all, just help people relate, connect with you as a person, and just add some entertainment value to the presentation and some enthusiasm. I think David said it before, smiling, just demonstrating that you're excited to be there. I think helps everyone feel that the time is valued, certainly by you making the pitch, and that you're just excited about the solution. So, this, when you're really maybe starting out, you may want to look for either a mentor or somebody else that you admire, who is inspirational to you as a source of inspiration. Not that you're going to, try, as David was saying, turn yourself into somebody else, but you can take so many great ideas for how other people deliver material just by watching them and then integrate it and make it your own. As a way to really kind of get grounded in the kind of speaker and presenter that you want to be. Leveraging your body language, facial expressions, and eye contact. Certainly, we're not going to go, too big so that we're distracting, but really using all of the communication mechanisms that you have available, just your voice, your slides, your facial expressions, how you're making eye contact, and really pulling people in. The visuals, the slides, everybody loves a good infographic or something that puts anything that you can quantify into a chart or a graph, just to mix it up in terms of kind of the type of information people are looking at. That really, I think, helps information just stick and resonate. Supporting your audience, and I think this really means helping them kind of bring them along. If we went back to those those 5 pillars of the outline that we talked about earlier, we want to kind of bring them along on a thought process so that they understand how we got from, one place to the next, and how this solution kind of really meets their needs. And so we're going to support them in that journey by kind of bringing them along. Using your voice. And so David talked a little bit about kind of pacing, pausing. One of the things that is so underused is the pause. I think a lot of times we're eager to fill up all of the time, and we want to talk really fast and get all the words in, but just pausing intentionally to allow information to sink in can be so effective. And remembering that this is an opportunity to relax, enjoy yourself. It might be easier said than done sometimes, but at the end of the day, these are really just amazing opportunities to connect with people. And, there's few things that are as professionally rewarding as being in a conversation with someone and seeing a light bulb go off. You know, seeing them like, get your point or think about the world a little bit differently after you've spoken to them. And that's what this is all about. That's what we want, is that in any of these pitches, we want to, you know, move somebody from where they are to a different way of thinking. And so we would just encourage, just relax and enjoy yourself. So that's our final tip. And I think at that point, we are ready to take any questions. So I would just open it up to Avery and Tian to kind of tee up anything that's going on in the chat. So I'll go on mute.
Thank you so much, David and Robin, for that wonderful presentation. I do have some questions ready to go. So let's go for the first one. Okay, question for David or Robin. After telling the truth, if pitching a product that is not yet developed, but could be with funding or the contract, how much do you tell of how ready or far along in development? We never imply we're out of the box ready, but wondering if we are completely transparent.
Okay, I would give that one to Robin, but I'll take it first and then Robin can add to it. The first obligation is always to tell the truth. If you are asked a question about where you are in the development process, you will lose your funding opportunity if you mislead them. However, there is a difference between telling them everything that you know about things unless they ask. So think of it in this, there's a continuum from failure to disclose, that's a problem. Full disclosure may create a problem. Somewhere in between there is where you want to be. And that is, what do they need to know about where you are now in order to address their question? If you add additional information, you've got to be very careful about what you're disclosing that might still be confidential or might still be in development. I recognize that that doesn't sound like much of an answer, but if you make the mistake of misleading them, it will come back to bite you. Let them pull the information from you, disclose what you need as you are dealing with it in the process. Robin, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I think that's a great answer. So just maybe two thoughts. One is not so much related to the actual presentation itself, but asking yourself, what all could we do in advance of going into a pitch to do testing, exploring? What can we document in terms of kind of the proof of concept? So if it's at idea stage, then I think being completely transparent about that. But are there any components that you could actually go through any kind of testing process just to kind of ground truth? So I think those are valuable, but I think that's something you do kind of in advance of the presentation. The second piece is knowing, having your answer ready to go. So one of the things we didn't talk about so much, but David and I also do a presentation just purely focused on answering questions. So one of the most important things you can do in advance of a presentation to boost your confidence is brainstorm every possible question that you might get. And there's going to be some, I mean, even going to the ones you really, really don't want to answer, but just brainstorming them all and coming up with, you know, the answer that you're comfortable sharing. And so knowing in advance how you're going to ask that question, should it come up, I think is the best way to go. And kind of going back to David's point, I think having honesty be your absolute kind of grounding point or starting point for that. All right.
Awesome.
Looks like we have another question.
Yep. So what are your thoughts on rehearsing the presentation? Is there such thing as too much rehearsing?
I'm smiling because I am working with a team right now where I have exactly that dilemma. I have two presenters that have got their material down and they are very facile at using their slides and delivering. I have three presenters that need a lot more rehearsal. So my caution is to the two people who are further along, I want to be very careful about not overly rehearsing them, because if they do it too many times, they will become robotic. And that's the worst thing that can happen, is they just start reciting the same points over and over again, and they're not enthused about the presentation. What I've done in that instance is I've actually broken the group into different segments. I'll do some individual coaching with those who need more coaching. and spend less time with the ones who need it. I've also had the full team together, but said, we're going to skip over part 3 today because we covered that yesterday. We're going to go immediately to part 4. As a coach, what you have to do is you have to deal with the people as they are, but there is a balance that you have to strike about over rehearsal of either individuals or teams. And that's the responsibility of a coach, is to figure out how to deal with those differences.
Great. Thank you so much, David. All right. Next question. Let's see. What are your tips on presentation feedback? Say a survey to gauge presentation impact and or lessons learned.
Robin, why don't you take that one? Because you do a lot with feedback.
I do. I personally love this. I think my guess is the reason you're asking is because you suspect there's some value there, and there absolutely is. One of the things I like to, so process-wise, the way you can, set it up in advance, obviously draft your questions in whatever tool, SurveyMonkey or any kind of polling tool, and have it ready to go. The best practice is, of course, to send it immediately, like as you close the presentation, so that it's like fresh in people's minds and they don't have to go back to it. So I absolutely love it. I would also encourage anybody, feedback is really a data point about what somebody else needs in that moment. And so as you look at feedback, I would just kind of take it with that kind of a little bit of distance and that lens, that it's not so much about you personally, but it's about what that other person needs or what they were looking for. And so when you analyze your feedback, it's kind of taking what's useful and leaving the rest. Because what we don't want is to get feedback that then it feels either discouraging or shakes our confidence to the point where you don't want to get out there again. So absolutely use it, take what's useful, and leave the rest.
Thank you, Robin. All right, next question. If your founder has a great idea, but public speaking isn't a strong suit, is it acceptable to have a team member who's more comfortable to take that role?
Well, obviously, you have to get the permission of the founder to do that, because the founder may say, it's my idea, I want to be the one to present it. But it's perfectly acceptable to make that decision. The fact that someone is not comfortable in the public environment for whatever reason, if they're willing to delegate and give you the authority, you are not only capable of doing that, but I think that's a good decision to be made. What you may want to do in that situation is have the founder there to answer questions that you cannot, have an explanation as to why you are making the presentation. Let's say, for example, that you are the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, and it's a technology play. So you may say, I've been asked to make this presentation because I have a deep background in technology that's applied here. So make sure your audience knows why you're doing the presentation. And if the founder is not there, have a good answer for why the founder is not there. The founder is not here because he or she has asked me to do this, but if you have a particular question, I will make sure that that information gets back to him. Perfectly okay. And I have seen executives make that decision a lot, where they delegate the presentation to someone else precisely because of their own discomfort. As long as they buy into it, it's okay.
Thank you, David. Next question. What are your thoughts about showing a customized video demo during the 10 slides part of the presentation? Should the video come before, after, or within the pitch deck?
I am a big fan of videos with a huge caveat, and that is you have to make sure that the technology works really well. Because I have seen people put embed the video into the middle of the presentation, they click on it and nothing happens. So you've got to make sure that it works flawlessly. You've got to practice it over and over again. The proverbial, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A video can be worth 1,000 pictures if it is done properly. There isn't a right answer to whether it should be done at the beginning, middle, or the end. It depends on how the presentation flows. In general terms, I would say you would want to provide an overview of your presentation, an overview of what your solution is, then turn to the video and say, now you can see the process in action, and then bring it to a close. There may be a reason, however, that you would put the video up front and then say, now let me tell you what you just saw. Here's the presentation. I think videos, if they can work from a technology standpoint, are worthwhile. Robin, you want to add anything on that one?
No, that was, I would very much agree.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Next question. Which slides do you want to spend the most time talking about?
Robin, take that. It's the most important ones, but they're looking.
Well, I would love a little bit more context around that. If the person that asked that question wants to elaborate just a little bit, I think that would be helpful. And maybe Nina, as you're, if you're able to come off mute and kind of tell us a little bit more. But I think it's, to me, I think there's an element here of kind of reading the room in terms of where the interest and energy is of your audience. And so having some flexibility as you go through, and if you read, if you're kind of looking around, whether it's the screen or you're there around the conference room table and you see people leaning in or eager, maybe wanting to ask a question, by all means, I mean, let's take a little bit, even if it takes you off script a little bit or kind of messes up the timing, the engagement is ultimately what you want. And so spending a little bit more time on those things of greatest interest to your audience, I think would be best. So Nina, I don't know if there's something else embedded in that question that I could elaborate on, or if that answers it.
Great answer. And I'm just trying to think of if you're just doing it over Zoom and you have 5 minutes and you have to tell them about your new company, what you've accomplished, where you currently are, where you're currently going, what the funding is, so there's a lot to get in.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, of just that standard investor deck, which 1 or 2 or 3 slides do your audience members want to hear the most about?
Right. Well, and I appreciate that additional context. And my guess, given that audience, they're informed, they're ready, they're there because they're kind of tuned in and kind of ready to hear that. So my guess is that you can probably go a little quicker over the front end stuff about the context setting. And then maybe spend a little bit more time on your solution, but to the degree that your solution meets their specific pain points in their language. So that would be my recommendation.
Understandable. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Let me add 2 things to that. One, if you are making a presentation to a government agency and there are various criteria, you are often given the weighting of those criteria, meaning that 50% of your score is on one factor, 25% on another factor. Your slides then should be adjusted to meet that weighting criteria because your audience has told you what they think is the most important. So that's one thing to think about, is what guidance have you gotten from your audience? The second thing that I would say to you is balance what you are putting on the slides and what you're doing in your presentation with what you might be able to leave behind. For example, if they are giving you, they want to know what your corporate background is, you may say, I'm going to cover it briefly here. I'm going to leave you a marketing piece about our company that has more details, but I really want to focus my 5 minutes here on the solution that we are presenting. So think about what you can leave behind as well as what you're giving them orally.
That's great advice. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you, David and Robin. Next question. How do you express nonverbal language in a virtual meeting?
Nonverbal. There are a couple of ways that I do it, and I think you've probably seen it in today's presentation with both Robin and me. One of them is when you are making a critical point, you can use hand gestures, those supplement. Another is you can lean forward to your camera if there's something that you really want to emphasize. That's a nonverbal clue. And then sitting back, you also just got a nonverbal clue from me, and that was I had to think for a minute before I answered the question. That's a verbal clue that I'm engaging with you, or a nonverbal clue that I'm engaging with you because I wanted to think a little bit before I spoke. So those are a couple of things off the top of my head. Robin, other nonverbal clues?
No, I love those. And I think what's at the heart of that question is that it still feels like, being in 2D, just two-dimensional, it doesn't feel quite as authentic as we would like at times when we are with an audience. But the benefits of it just opens up so many more, opportunities to connect with more people. And so I totally understand the limitations. I think you can still use your 2x2 square to your greatest advantage by, varying some of your tone, your gesture, your pacing, to really have an impact. But, I hear you. There's some definite differences between that and being in person.
Let me add one other thing. We didn't talk about what I would call dress code, but I think you can send a strong signal to people by the way that you carry yourself, including the way that you dressed. Just as an example, Robin and I talked yesterday, and I asked her, what are you going to wear for the presentation? She's obviously not in a tie like I am. She told me she wasn't going to be that. But your audience, if it is a government agency, may expect to see coat and tie. More and more audiences, and particularly with angel investors and so on, they may be very casual. My statement to people is don't ever be overdressed by somebody else. Meaning, if you think that your audience may be in what you would call business casual, go into business attire. If you think they're going to wear a coat but not a tie, go ahead and make the tie, because it is saying to your audience, you are important to me. I want to present myself in the best possible light. It's another nonverbal clue.
Thank you so much, David. This next question actually kind of ties into that one. How important is background appearance versus physical appearance during the presentation?
Robin, you want to take that one?
Well, I will, David, but I would just invite you to, you had some great points earlier just about the blurred effect and so forth. So why don't you go ahead and grab that one?
Okay. I am very comfortable with people in a natural background as long as the lighting is okay, because all of our audiences understand that primarily because of the pandemic, we're in a home office environment. So I just give people a couple of things. What is the audience seeing behind you? Simple example, but it's important. I have had some people, and in their background, I can see that they went to Notre Dame. I'm picking on Corky because I know he went to Notre Dame. You want to avoid that because they may have gone to a rival school. So think about that. Is there something there that might be offensive to somebody? Think about that. I had one of the people that I was training who liked to wear t-shirts in practice, and they were pretty strongly stated t-shirts. And obviously for the formal presentation, she wasn't going to be dressed that way, but I was cognizant of that because there was a message there. I don't like blurred backgrounds. I want to emphasize that again, because if you blur the background, you do get a halo effect and your hand movements become very exaggerated. Other than that, I'm perfectly okay with what's in the background. And sometimes I've seen members of the audience point something out in the background. Hey, is that a picture of your dog? And that invites the audience to have a rapport with you. You don't want a moving dog, but a picture of dog may be okay.
Awesome. Thank you, David. All right, next question. For David, can you share some advice you give to your fast talker clients?
Slow down. I'm actually going to take that in a couple of different ways. There are people who are fast talkers just by their very nature. There are people who come from different backgrounds. It may be English as a second language, or it may be from a different country or whatever, that just the normal course of conversation is fast. The point that I make with people like that is I have them talk to me, and then I will say, too fast, slow down. I will have them stop between slides. I will have them pause between bullet points on slides. And I will rehearse with them to get them to slow down. Now, I don't want to change their cadence so that they become stilted or uncomfortable, but just getting them to talk to me where I push back on them. It's too fast. I can't pick it up quickly enough. You've got to slow down. And then we have a dialogue back and forth. I'll work with them and get them to emphasize the pauses and to change the cadence from time to time. One other thing that happens when people are fast talkers is they'll start to use acronyms and shorthand terms, abbreviations. You want to be really careful with that because you don't want to lose your audience. So if you're talking about a government agency, say it's DHS, a lot of times that just gets slurred, so you may have to spell it out. Sometimes getting fast talkers to spell out terms or explain terms gets them to slow down a little bit. A lot of it is just my practice with them, getting them to do more pauses and more effective use of their terminology.
Thank you, David. Next question. Do you have any examples of someone that has presented or pitched well?
Examples of somebody that has pitched well? I'm not sure I know what that means.
I believe they mean like, do you have any examples or videos of someone that has presented well?
Well, I hope that people will take away that Robin and I presented well, but off the top of my head, I don't, but here's my caveat. I've often used Ronald Reagan, for example, as an example of somebody who was an incredibly polished speaker. If you go back and look at some of his speeches, he had the ability to connect with his audiences in a way that few people do. More recently, Barack Obama is one of the most powerful speakers I've seen. But I worry about using examples like that for two reasons. One, because people may have different political bents and they may be not in favor of one versus the other. The other is that I don't want people to try and emulate somebody that they've seen on a video because it's not them. I watch public presentations and I like town hall meetings a lot because I see different styles of speaking. I don't try and adapt those to who I am, but I can see things that work for particular people and things that don't work. If you watch town halls or political debates and you see question and answers, you'll pick up immediately somebody who has been trained to answer questions carefully and people who are sloppy at answering. So it's a very long answer to your question. I don't have anything that I can direct you to except to pay attention when you're watching public speakers on television and see if there are clues that you can pick up from them.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And this is our final question. What tips for a 4-minute pitch and follow-up do you have for online investment discussions?
You've got 4 minutes to make your pitch. Is that the
Yes.
gist of the question? Wow. Robin, take that one because I'm not sure I have a quick answer, but let's think about that together. 4-minute pitch, what would we do?
Well, I would encourage to kind of go back to that 5-point outline that we shared in content. So, 4 minutes, it is incredibly short, but with intention, I think you can hit all of your major points. So big major change, why are you doing this? What's going to happen if if you don't make the change, kind of that adapt or get cut? Your solution, kind of in their words, and how it addresses, what makes it unique and addresses their specific pain points. So I think the outline that we shared is intentionally kind of can scale depending on the amount of time that you have, but kind of walking them through, supporting them through that thought process, I think will kind of help somebody really understand the broader context and what your solution is.
If I had only 4 minutes, my advice to you would be 2 slides, because you want to have something that they can absorb quickly and be able to take away. Without knowing what the presentation is or who you're talking to, I don't know what those 2 slides would say. But if I had my choice, I would say one of them should be a graphic, meaning a description of the process or the pitch that you are making that they can see visually. And the other slide would be a summary of the 3 or 4 points that drive directly to what it is that will make their funding decision. I'm always a fan of 3 to 5. People can't absorb more than 5 things on a particular slide. So think of it in this way. For the first 2 minutes, I want to explain to you what it is that I'm pitching to you. For the second 2 minutes, I want to address the 3 to 5 points that convince you to give me the funding for what I'm looking for.
All right, and that, I believe that is the end of our questions for now. If anyone else has questions, we will stay on for a few more minutes. But thank you all for joining. Thank you, David and Robin, for the presentation. I hope you all learned a lot and had a great time. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to stay, and we will be here.